What is going on, guys? It is Wrestlemania here, back with another video. We just did our video on the real story of Wrestlemania and how it became a success. But how could Wrestlemania have failed, and what repercussions could this have had on the business and the McMahons? Here are 6 scenarios which could have harmed or even ruined the entire show. Number 1. Vince doesn't pay for publicity. The PR campaign led to things such as Hogan's appearance on the Richard Belzer's talk show, which led to T and Hogan hosting Saturday Night Live. Without the Saturday Night Live appearance, there wouldn't have been so many walk-up sales, and it's very possible that WrestleMania wouldn't have even broken even at best. Number 2. MTV backs out of co-promoting wrestling events. The first MTV wrestling special did such record ratings that MTV executives aired 2 follow-up specials, including the War to Settle the Score, which set up WrestleMania's main event. After the brawl, MTV executives realized that while the WWF was delivering excellent ratings, they were delivering national exposure to the WWF. MTV executives decided they wanted something more and asked for a slice of the pie. Vince McMahon told them no, and that was the end of the WWF on MTV. What if MTV acted earlier in asking for money? What if they'd approached Vince McMahon after the brawl to settle it all, and McMahon decided to cut ties with MTV? That would have been a real blow to the WWF, as 2 subsequent shows on MTV were integral to promoting WrestleMania. WrestleMania would have had less mainstream appeal, arguably failing to sell enough tickets to make it a success. Number 3. Mr. T Flakes Out. Mr. T's unpredictable temperament made him a true WrestleMania wildcard. How would Vince McMahon salvage the show if Mr. T didn't show up, since a large part of the main event's appeal was seeing the TV tough man teaming up with the Hulkster? While the WWF has a card subject to change clause, you can be sure there would have been a lot of people asking for refunds and angry owners of closed-circuit venues. Number 4. Mr. T gets taken out. Legitimate tough man wrestler Dr. D. David Schultz, well known for beating up TV reporter John Stossel after being asked if wrestling is fake, reportedly wanted to be in the main event alongside Mr. T, taking Hogan's place. Some claim that Schultz even tried to challenge Mr. T to a fight in the hope that he might interject himself into the main event at WrestleMania. While Schultz's logic may seem baffling, Hulk Hogan claims Vince McMahon had to step in at one point to calm Schultz down. Another story is that rival promoters considered hiring Bruiser Brody to jump Mr. T on his way to the ring, leading to the main event being cancelled. Number 5. WrestleMania loses its satellite feed. WrestleMania was broadcast live via satellite to hundreds of venues, but what if something happened and the feed was cut? Technical difficulties? Sabotage by rival promoters? Whatever the cause, if the venues didn't receive the show, the WWF would have had to issue refunds. Keep in mind that this actually happened during WrestleMania 2. The feed to Pittsburgh went out and the WWF had to issue refunds. And number 6. Roddy Piper gets the boot. There are several scenarios where Roddy Piper could have left the WWF. The first is the real-life tension between Piper and Mr. T. If the two came to blows before the show, which actually happened, and someone got hurt, the main event would have been in jeopardy. Secondly, Roddy Piper was not under contract to the WWF until just a little over a week before WrestleMania. Piper's memoir, In the Pit with Piper, details the moments McMahon sprung a contract on him. Vince then proceeded to open up his briefcase, and he put this contract in front of me. I looked at him, and he looked at me, and there were about 4 or 5 beats of silence. He finally said, "Hot Rod, you know things are changing, and I can't have you in WrestleMania unless you sign the contract." Piper reluctantly signed, realizing his days of being a free agent were over. But what if he didn't sign? There's also a situation where a WWF official told Piper the night of his kayfabe attack on Cyndi Lauper, "The end of Cyndi Lauper's career could be the beginning of yours." Piper admits he considered it but backed off at the last second. Had he actually injured Lauper, there's no telling of the consequences. Finally, Piper was asked to do the job for Mr. T, something he was adamantly opposed to because, number 1, he didn't want his career diminished by losing to a celebrity, and number 2, he wanted to maintain a strong record for subsequent one-on-one matches with Hulk Hogan. In the end, McMahon relented, having Orndorff to do the job instead. Had Piper been ordered to lay down for T, he could have walked out, endangering the main event. The majority of Mania's success was because of the right place in the right time and a little lady luck shining on the McMahons. The move elevated Hulk Hogan to a nationwide plateau and wrestling in general. Had WrestleMania been a flop, there was a strong likelihood that Vince McMahon would have been out of business, as he invested a good chunk of money into it. Wrestlers would have no choice but to disperse into different territories, and the business would certainly not be what it is today. It's fair to say that without the success of Hulkamania making the WWF into a multi-million-dollar company, the regional territories would still be alive today. But some argue territorial wrestling was eventually going the way of the dodo, with or without Vince McMahon. Had WrestleMania failed, Titan Sports would have folded and turned ownership of the WWF back to Gorilla Monsoon and Arnold Scarland. After that, the AWA or Jim Crockett Promotions would have stepped up as the major national promotion. But just how successful wrestling would have been in that scenario is questionable. Verne Gagne was going to continue to promote wrestling like it was still 1975, and Jim Crockett Jr. was a terrible businessman who trusted an even worse businessman in Dusty Rhodes with running his company. Add to the fact that it's rumored Mr. T approached Verne Gagne with a similar idea of a celebrity in a wrestling event 2 years prior, and Gagne rejected, saying, "Wrestling doesn't operate that way." Some believe, however, that even if WrestleMania had flopped, Vince would never be in financial ruin. On Scott Keith's Wrestling Observer recaps at the blogofdoom.com, he looks into the newsletter on the 25th of March 1985, 6 days before WrestleMania, and points out how Vince put everything on the line was complete nonsense, and that Vince had signed a deal with NBC to put wrestling on a primetime slot whenever Saturday Night Live was off on Saturdays, which is an incredible spot to have. He quotes, "More stuff with the WWF as they continue to explode. Now it seems that there's going to be a Saturday morning cartoon featuring Hulk Hogan and his friends. Now, Dave makes an interesting point here about WrestleMania, which kind of shoots down the main legend about the show before it even happens. He notes that with the kind of money infusion that the WWF is getting from the 1-2 punch of deals with both CBS and NBC, even if the house show business tanks, they'll still have so much cash on hand that they can easily survive for years off the network TV deal alone. So the idea that WrestleMania was going to break the company if it failed is ridiculous, because just 2 weeks before that show, they signed a pair of likely $1 million deals with major networks. Plus the shit that was going down with Crockett at the end of the month was worth another $1 million. They weren't going anywhere, WrestleMania or no WrestleMania. In our opinion, Vince is a smart man, and we're sure he would have never put all his eggs in one basket. But what do you think would have happened if WrestleMania had failed? Write down in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, or a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe if you already haven't, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.